Hello, hibiscuses. So, I wanted to give you a heads up that this video is not a comfortable video. It honestly will be so much of an uneasy listen that I actually consider this my trigger warning, okay? In this video, we are going to discuss concentration camps. We're going to discuss the reality of human rights violations. We're going to discuss the reality of what happens when fascism escalates and different kinds of imprisonment. Because one thing I am hell bent on being in the era of propaganda and censorship is honest. Because I think when you deal with the reality of what's in front of you, you can unite, you can successfully dismantle, challenge, and resist, as opposed to indulging yourself in delusions that this is not happening. Because you know what? Thoughts, prayers, manifestations, whatever yucky techniques these people are using to keep you docile, confused, and in denial, enough is enough, right? Understandably, this is not easy to hear. So I understand if you want to click off now, if this is too much. By all means, protect your emotional well-being and mental well-being, but when you're ready, listen to it. Because my hopes is, if I can do this video correct, I will empower you with enough understanding, hopefully solutions and ideas, that as we progress through this time, you only get sharper, you only get more defiant, and you only feel more empowered, right? Because the reality is, Saturn, the planet of imprisonment, bad friends, human misery, the enforcer for karmas, is going through the 9 types of Pisces. And the Pisces nakshatras represent different kinds of imprisonment, illusions, collective suffering, but also compassion, healing, ancestral blessings. So, if you're ready, grab a cup of jar, get comfortable. Let's have our most rawest, candid cosmic chit chat. Let's go, hibiscuses. So I find myself in a really bizarre position because I wrote this horoscope and these predictions last year, and it is very peculiar to watch your predictions come true, but in a way that is so much more crueler and grimmer than you could ever imagine, right? And I have found it emotionally very challenging. But then I remembered, like, of course, Vedic astrology is a religious practice. The gifts we have them for a reason. And I wanted to share this with you, right? Because I at no point do I want you to watch this video and feel powerless, right? Because the truth is you have never been stronger and more closer to your liberation. Regardless of the community you exist in, I promise you that is the case. Do not fall for their propaganda. Do not fall for their fear tactics. It is very much, you can grasp it with your fingertips. Think of it like this, right? Astrologically, we are in the downfall of colonialism. It's going to play out over many decades, but the oppressors know this. They can no longer benefit from the exploitation the way that they have. All this nastiness, all this evil, all this disrespect, this very clear manufactured hate, right? It's the last grasp for power. Because like many of you, I am equally horrified and confused every day, right? And it seems, it's not, do you know what it is? It's this weird thing of like, you no longer feel like you can be shocked and then something else happens and then you're doubly shocked. So this is the way I look at it. Every day, every week, every month, every year that we have seen this escalation of the darkest of hearts. Weirdly enough, I was thinking about it. I become more courageous. I become more resistant. I definitely become more funny. I become more intelligent and wise. Like, it's so weird, but in the face of such evil, because that's what, I'll be honest with you, like I have this whole thing about what do I think good and evil are, and are they real and are they man-made, but like for me, like this is a time of evil. I have never felt more purposeful. I have never felt more useful. I have never felt more connected. I have never felt more loving. It's that thing I've always tried to teach you lot. Creation and destruction are one of the same, right? We all come from one source. And that should give us a lot of comfort, because the same thing that can build them is the same thing that can help us to break them, right? And in fact, let's talk about the big theme that I pulled together when I was originally creating content for this horoscope, right? So if you have time, go and check out my Instagram page. You probably have to scroll a lot, but this exists somewhere on that page. The main thing I kept getting was, I was like, okay, symbolically or quite literally, that karmic prison is opening, right? This is going to be a big thing. And at the time when I was writing it, I felt, because I'm always so nervous to come across unhinged or looking like I'm in psychosis of some sorts, right? But as I was working my way through my predictions and looking at history and everything that had been, I realized what we're seeing at this time is not just grave injustices, but we are getting such a deep lesson from God of the consequences of becoming numb. These are the consequences of minimizing and diluting our journey towards liberation. And this is what happens when you kiki or you try to pander to the oppressors. Because again, like in the back of my mind, and these are pieces that you'll see on my YouTube page throughout the year, we live in a time where people who were oppressed have become the oppressors. That's why I think I go out my way to teach you about the different flavors of fascism, so you don't become so easily duped and think about like identity politics. I want you to look at it like it's one clear blueprint. All the oppressors use it. Our ability to identify the blueprint and know the solutions is really where the magic happens, and it comes with collective work, right? And let's talk about prisons, because this is my point. It's not just a time of injustices, it's a time of calling in justice, making justice happen. I wrote down, because again, Saturn only entered the Pisces nakshatra March of this year. Here's a list of things that have happened literally since then. So again, the theme was karmic prisons open quite literally and symbolically. We've had obviously Trump supporters regretting their vote. P. Diddy, lol guys, it's been a long day. P. Diddy, right? A historical predator, navigating in daylight, never thinking he could be taken down, in court, globally being held accountable, right? Someone who was deeply enabled, now at the mercy of justice, of the everyday people he probably looked down on or thought could have been his victims. I want to talk to you a little bit about environmental crimes. It's called the Indonesian oil scandal. So there is a company called Pertamina. Hopefully I said that right. Essentially, for a very long time, they were abusing the oil industry in Indonesia and harming the citizens. And because it happened over decades and they thought they were untouchable, guess who finds himself under the heavy gaze of justice? There are loads of cases of different Nepo babies and, authoritarian figures who are now being called out from embezzlement. If you didn't know, there are many cases that became active around offshore oil and gas, and people being held accountable for kind of like creating war zones over having that oil and gas. You have many people whistleblowing, right? And they're essentially exposing millions of dollars worth of bribery. These people are now in global investigations, hefty fines, and I think it's speaking to how one person can actually bring in much more justice than they think. At this time, I was thinking about it deeply, whilst so much corruption is being exposed, and again, we're seeing it very visibly being formed, you've never had more successful resistant movements in the modern history than you're seeing like this year. And we're only about 2 months into it, barely, right? Because again, let me draw your attention to Bangladesh, right? There was this wonderful student group that was formed around late February 2025. They began doing more powerful protests around May of this year. And within days, they got what they were asking for, right? Even if I want you to think of Turkey, right? So the day that Saturn entered Pisces, tens and thousands of wonderful, beautiful Turkish citizens rallied in Istanbul to demand justice, right? And they are currently building a cross-ideological front against an authoritarian figure, right? And this movement is spanning all the different provinces of Turkey. And that's also the power in Saturn going through Pisces. It's not just this like overwhelming, ghoulish show of corruption, human rights violations, and I think the loss of a lot of like good policies is also a phenomenal time where you see the might of a collective. You see the everyday person become a spectacular historical figure. I want you to think about when you have been studying different historical times of people fighting back. Think about the most powerful pictures you see of those times is usually a everyday person doing a defiant act. And think about the energy and the feelings and the wisdom it gives you in these turbulent times. Because I keep telling you, we're not just in historical time. You are directly making history, right? You have a chance to create a brighter future. You have a chance to not fall for the same mistakes that your ancestors have done when it comes to getting their liberation. You have a chance to chuck out and find a way to deal with all the tokens who keep delaying your story of freedom and peace and unity and justice within your own communities. So the same thing that caused me to write, unfortunately, very uncomfortable predictions. As I work myself through this time, I realize that it's the same thing that gives the collective medicine to fight back, because you can't have one without the other. Look, hibiscuses, before I start breaking down why Saturn going through the Pisces nakshatras is going to force us to become the warriors, the activists, the game changers that we didn't even know we could be, I wanted to give you 3 things that I think you should try to make time to do. And I believe you will be given ample opportunity over the next 2.5 years to do so. So the first one that came to mind was whistleblowing, right? I kept thinking as I was looking at, okay, well, what's already happened a few months into this transit that I wrote about last year? And I was like, oh my God, you've seen like a choir of whistleblowers across the world speak their truth. And I think that's very powerful because in whistleblowers, what you see is the power of the individual, the power of the person who is overlooked, not seen as important, not seen as someone who can make change, have the ability to cripple, topple historical, like corrupt systems, organizations, institutions, approaches, and services. And I always keep this in mind because I think I've seen this a lot throughout the years that I've been reading for people. It is often when it is the most scariest for us to speak our truth that our truth is the most potent, right? And again, I'm going to put some links here that can help you kind of navigate the process of whistleblowing. But I want you to understand, as everything's going down, Jupiter is going through the 9 types of Gemini, right? So Mrigasira is the hunt for the truth. Ardra is the reckoning of when the truth is told. Purnavasu is what is rebuilt after the truth is acknowledged and all of that. So you have never been more empowered to speak your shit. But I'm aware that power dynamics, fear of retaliation, all of that can naturally make it not seem that great to speak the fuck up. But in the era of fascism, censorship, propaganda, and very much the fight for our freedoms and human rights, we have to find a way, right? And I believe there will be an art to whistleblowing that we can all learn, and there will be a way that we can learn to speak our truths that can really get in the face of this ugliness that unfortunately is going to be right eye to eye looking back at us. Number 2, grassroots movements. Hear me out, right? When I was reflecting on what I had seen in the few weeks that we've had this transit, I was like, oh my God, we are seeing the resurrection in people understanding the power, right? You do not have to think the only way you can be effective is jumping between two parties, because ultimately they have failed us. Across the world, when we look at two-party systems, we very unfortunately exist in a time where it feels like it's choosing between the lesser of two evils and always being not surprised when whatever we picked let us down. Those times are over. Again, look at the previous videos I've done. I've told you new political parties are going to be forming. But I want you to look at it like this, right? When you think of any kind of right that you currently enjoy, that was created because the people took to the streets. The people refused to engage with the oppression. The people stopped working. This is the whole thing. If you want to dismantle oppression, you have to completely break away from all their norms. I'm talking like you don't engage with them the way that they used to or they see as dignified and respectful, because can I tell you something? You don't have to communicate in the same way as the person who is responsible for manufacturing you into poverty, into illness, into living a life that is not dignified and fuels you with low self-esteem. That's not the MO, right? And again, grassroots movements are so powerful because they break away from the systems, the structures, the norms, the language. They do not allow the oppressor to have any leg room but to give you your freedom and your right to safety, health, prosperity, all of that jazz. And again, at this time, you are being blessed with many grass movements popping up. Even before I started filming this, right, I was going through my TikTok and there was this wonderful series on a group that had formed in the States in America. And essentially, it's a community coming together to fight off ICE, right? The fucking Gestapo of America. And it was so interesting because they had learned all their rights and they were like, we just want them to know we exist. And wherever they are, we're a step behind them because we know our rights. And when we see you misstepping, collectively we'll hold you accountable. And that's the energy. Like, the individual is powerful, right? When an individual speaks their truth, you never know what it does to the collective and what changes it can make. But the actual shift of power, you have to learn to move and groove within a group. That's why I always think it's really important to speak about when you look at colonialism. Colonialism is only started up because the oppressors learn how to befriend their victims. Then their second step is to create divisions in their victim societies so they can keep exploiting, extracting, and essentially everyone's too busy to notice the thievery. So in you drawing, sorry, such, as you can tell, it's been an emotional video. In you joining these grassroots movements, I promise you, it's no longer just like voting for an imaginary change. You are physically doing stuff that will usher in the stuff that you want to see, right? And again, I'll do my best to put a list here of different grassroots movements you can join or ways to learn about the power of grassroots movements. And hopefully this video reaches someone who wants to start one and will have a big community shifting and change. That's stuff that, like, I hope I make an impact in hibiscuses. Number 3, concepts. So this might sound a bit fluffy, but hear me out, right? I was thinking about when people are striving for liberation, what kind of those breaking moments where you can see people tangibly hold on to something because they know what they're striving for. And I was like, oh, but concepts change that, right? When people understand what's happening around them and it's kind of captured, that's when the mood changes. Because the issue is when people are oppressed and they're suffering, a part of oppression is to weather you down and kind of intentionally make you stupid and drained and kind of dysfunctional as possible. So you do the labor for your oppressor, but you're not switched on or have enough energy in you. Just imagine like being iron deficient, but in a much more like intellectual, spiritual kind of way, right? Then it's easier to hurt you, right? It's easier to manipulate you. It's easier to keep you there. Because sometimes when you're going through oppression, it feels like a poltergeist. All you know is there's shit flying around your house. You have a low mood. You always feel like someone's watching you and it's not in your anxiety. But like you physically can't see that thing that's hurting you, but you know it exists. Do you know what? Oppression is so violent. When I sit here like talking and stuff, I'm always like, you are a cruel motherfucking beast. But my point is, when you create concepts, you give somebody not only the ability to understand what's happening to them, but the tools for their liberation. So I was thinking about two big things that instantly came to mind, right? So think about the concept of financial inclusion, right? Obviously, we think that's the world where, well, this is the thing, we might not. So when people think of financial inclusion, people have different ideas of what that looks like. But what do you do if the concept we're given of financial inclusion incorporates the suffering of others, or it means we can only be abundant if we take something away from other people? That, like, hibiscus is, I have always believed this. You are all so smart, so intelligent, so capable, so many different skills. Like, you are all really fucking incredible, but you guys do not back your work enough. When I think about the fucking thousands and hundreds of readings I do, like, every fucking year, the amount of times in a week that I am screaming on a call, why the fuck are you not putting your work out there? What is it? What bondage is stopping you from speaking? You may not think you're impressive, but you'd be surprised how your knowledge can spark something in other people, right? It's important. Put it out there. Help people understand. You work in different industries, different sectors. We need new concepts because the concepts and understandings we have of the world and one another are too often, frighteningly, they're inspired and curated by our oppressors. We don't know a world free of them. We don't have one thing in the society that hasn't been poisoned by them. And if you took anything away from Saturn going through Aquarius videos that I did, I told you the new game changers are going to be put on their paths. Create that work, hibiscuses. It's not your ego. It's not you having like an obnoxious sense of self. You feel that passion for that project, for those ventures, for those visions you have of society, your cultures, your community, for a fucking reason. Get to work. You're being initiated on your path. Even like the second concept that instantly came to mind was like the term intersectionality, right? Think about how that concept holds oppressors accountable, that like an inclusive society is one where every bitch is free. And you can't be telling me as long as 1, 2, and 3 are okay, who cares what 4 and 5 goes through? So think about when we talk about different movements, how often Muslim, Black women, Black people, full standard, the trans babes, they are never given the same priority, the same urgency, the same respect and dignity as perhaps their lighter skinned peers, or people who belong to religions that are seen as more palatable, or the babes who maybe you can't see their religion on their features, or the babes that express their gender and sexuality in a way that's comforting to the oppressors. Come up with the motherfucking concepts, give the babes the word, give them the vision of what the future could be. Put that work out there. I'll try my best to create links to what I'm talking about, but you get the vibe. Hopefully you get the vibe. Other than that, let's start breaking down Saturn, shall we? In Vedic astrology, each planet symbolizes hundreds of different elements, features, and aspects of life, right? And when a planet goes through particular star signs, you find that a few of those features are more pronounced. Now, Saturn going through Pisces is really going to bring up the themes of imprisonment, restrictions, limitation, karmic consequences. If you like, Saturn really here is becoming a jailer of some sorts. But the interesting thing is that we see two paths opening up. For some people, as Saturn goes through Pisces nakshatras, it's going to feel like that sentence you have been serving is finished. You are going to feel like you are being liberated from whatever prison you were shackled in for whatever years or decades you have existed. But likewise, Saturn is consequences. And I'm sure you can see this in the different countries and communities that you currently exist in. Many people are about to face very long chapters in their life of suffering because they are going to start sobering up how their beliefs, their lifestyles, their actions, their behaviors, all that jazz has put them into those prisons. Hopefully not literally, but I think symbolically, you can tell what time it is. And in fact, let me share a few stories of Shani, aka Saturn, in our religious scriptures so you can understand why he so heavily embodies this theme of imprisonment. And after that, we'll start going through the Pisces nakshatras. Point number 1, Saturn is the lord of time and karma. The first thing that really came to mind was when you read our different religious scriptures, no one escapes Saturn. Saturn visits peasants, princes, and gods alike. But that only sounds menacing if you've been up to menacing stuff. Because look at it this way. If for all your life, all you've known is suffering and hardships and like really like a lot of work, when Saturn visits you, it might be Saturn's hand that lifts you to the heights of kings. But likewise, let's just say like symbolically, if you are a bratty little prince, well, when Saturn visits you, he will remind you you are only human. And in a blink of an eye, you will be sitting amongst those that you thought you were above, if not lower than them. And then even the God stories, the one that I always think of is when Saturn visits Shiva, right? Shiva jumps into a body of water and kind of hides out for years. But even then, like, you can't escape Saturn. It's kind of giving a nod that Saturn visits us for like 7.5 years, 3 cycles. But again, it's only menacing if you've been doing menacing stuff. Otherwise, Saturn will always reward. It matches you. And that's why I find it so interesting who fears Saturn returns and who's kind of ready for them. Because Saturn respects discipline. Saturn respects ethics. Saturn respects good intentions. So if you're laced with them, the underdog can become the king. I imagine if you're riddled with anything else, this is very much the classic story of Prince to Pauper, right? The thing is, I think with Saturn, what you really see is this idea of Lord of time and karma. In some ways, I think in Saturn, you see important stories such as everything is impermanent. Your suffering is not forever. Your sorrows will not last forever. Like, everything will move because I make it move. It's just simply a matter of timing. But likewise, your good times don't last forever. Your indulgences can't last forever. I will move that dial. And then when it comes to karma, there are several different types. That's probably a video for another time. Number 2, I think when you look at the nature of Saturn in different religious scriptures, he's always seen as this entity that kind of delays, restricts, almost like contracts. But the point is, he's often forcing an introspection, right? Whether it's he's putting people in jails, making them ill, delaying them, obstacles, challenge. But nonetheless, at the core of it is a time for introspection. So again, as we go through these predictions, I think one thing to keep in mind is all of these failings of humanity and society that we are seeing and going to see more of, it is the consequence of our laziness, our complacency, the excuses that we make. Because one thing I keep thinking is a lot of this could have been avoided if we'd actually done the work that our ancestors had set out for us to do instead of becoming complacent. And sometimes maybe it takes an ass kicking to understand why unfinished dreams are important to complete. Because how can you know paradise without building it? How can you not, like, think it's so paradoxical, but you would only know light if you knew darkness, right? I always make this show, if everything was light and bright and all of that all the time, we would live in epileptic whiteness, right? It wouldn't work. You might even resent the light. So I think there's a lot of stuff like that where like sometimes you will only appreciate your freedom, your right to speech, inclusion. You will only appreciate, then this is human nature, you will only appreciate what you have post suffering. We also think suffering is like a level of remedy in a lot of dharmic faiths. And I always argue this point. I often think the West is very confused about the nature of dharmic faiths, because in some ways I think we're more crueler religions. Generally, I think we're a little bit more beefed out and gangster than people might think, because we don't really have this idea of forgiveness the same way Abrahamic faiths do, right? There is no really big savior. Everything is crafted around frameworks and philosophies of self-awareness and accountability. So when you suffer, it's the hands of your choices and your beliefs. When you thrive, it's at the hands of your choices and belief. God comes into it, but like, you are not blameless in the journey that you have. And I've always been like, that's really powerful, because I often think about, I get it a lot in readings, right? Because obviously, like, I read for people who are not all the time lovely and great, right? And it's never lost on me how they will sit there and probably have the biggest tantrums out of everybody around like, I don't understand why A, B, and C is happening, but never in the same breath can they sit there. And bear in mind, I see the chart, I see everything that you do. I just don't even say it, right? They will never admit what actions they may have taken that God is now meeting them in this way. Whereas like you'll get somebody who perhaps, we all make mistakes, right? But it always surprises me when you get people who make mistakes and they're like, you know what, back in this year I did this and now I feel like it's really biting me in the ass. What do you reckon the best way is to problem solve? There I see hope. And then there's a key difference. But again, Saturn is that way. The other thing I was thinking about was Saturn as more of a persona as opposed to like these big concepts of karma and time and consequences. So if you didn't know, Shani in our religious scriptures is so horribly rejected. Like people are so cruel towards Shani. So I think when you look at Shani, you are looking at themes such as like exile, othering. What's really fascinating is Shani actually represents marginalized people, right? And you have some like Vedic astrologers that actually think Shani represents like different kinds of African and kind of like different kinds of Black people, actually. Because again, they think about the most marginalized people in society. So I've always found that really interesting, right? But again, think of it like this. We live in this weird time where people who were historically oppressed have now become the oppressors. And I think with Saturn moving and grooving through Pisces the way that it is and the way that we foresee, I think people are going to be forced to look at the tokens and kind of the weaponization of victimhood that are now holding back movement. So for instance, look at it like this, right? I am very passionate about Punjabi liberation, right? I think my country, like many of you, like I have that thing of like, my people are great, my country, like I have such passion and pride for it. But in the same breath, the reality is we have people inside of our community who are too attached to the comforts of licking the oppressor's ass and all of that shit, quite literally and symbolically. They would never let us have liberation because they don't want to lose their little trinkets. So therefore, when it comes to internal issues such as alcoholism, sexism, gender-based violence, patriarchy, homophobia, transphobia, casteism, colorism, anti-blackness, how could I have Punjabi liberation if my community is still stuck in these poisons? So instead of like, that's where you see the different elements of rejection and exile and Saturn come up, saying like, you want your own freedom, but in the same breath, you navigate and hold beliefs that exile other and reject people. So what we do in here, hibiscuses, right? And then, do you know one thing I was also thinking about? In our scriptures, Saturn's actually tossed away by his mother, and he's kind of in some scriptures symbolized as being like disfigured. And I was thinking, like, do you think that disfigurement is symbolic of self-hatred and it takes a lifetime to kind of unlearn that? Because I think sometimes ironically, the process of learning for me has been so much unlearning, but it's also been like so comical because I'm like, oh, ha, ha, I know nothing. And then people are like, you're so smart. But I'm like, it's so weird. The more I feel like I know nothing, you all perceive me as being wiser. Whereas I'm like, I've never bbeen more hungry to learn instead of being like, I know it all when I was like younger. And it's just, I don't know. I think it's funny and fascinating and confusing as always. And then the other thing about being cast away from his mother, I'm not gonna lie, the first thing that came to mind was, I was like, this one's for all the tokens that thought sucking on the nipple of their oppressor would keep them fed. No, you're gonna work out there wasn't breast milk, it was formula. Now what? I do think there's something to that. Like, there are separate videos I want to make, but I think a huge conversation we're going to be having and you're going to be seeing is those people who aligned with oppression or weaponize their identities to then do oppressive stuff. Where are you now? Like, where has your alignment with those things got you? Nowhere, because you find yourself in the same prison that you were trying to put other people. So yeah, when we look at Saturn, we see imprisonment. And we see different kinds of imprisonment, right? Because again, like, I'll briefly take you through the Pisces nakshatras and then we'll do it bit by bit. But when we look at Pisces, we see different kinds of imprisonment. So with Purva Bhadrapada, that's Pisces type 1, it's kind of like this psychological and spiritual imprisonment. So all I kept thinking about was like all those people who've gone along with fascist propaganda. They've been like fueled by hatred and in all the different flavors that hatred comes in. In these 2.5 years, you're literally going to see how your values and beliefs have led you to like unimaginable or terrible circumstances. And then obviously with the spiritual prison, this, I imagine, I only too quickly thought of like how people use ChatGPT to use like get spiritual guidance and how they're all going to look insane in these streets. Again, go and watch my TikToks. I've been talking about it. I'll probably have a presentation about it somewhere on Instagram. But yeah, I do think you will see very much the consequences of becoming a prisoner to ideologies that are just not healthy or safe. And it's like the delusion you use to enable and excuse yourself from following these. It's just heinous hibiscuses, right? Because again, think about it. When you become a prisoner of these ideologies, so many people are victims then of depression, anxiety, fucking schizophrenia. What's the other one? Is it psychosis? Like, it's just, oh God. And then it creates like addictive personalities, right? Because you get addicted to these values and beliefs because it gives you some sort of weird high, some weird buzz. But then simultaneously, like an addict, it's destroying you. But you literally won't know it until like, I don't know, you hit rock bottom. And I don't know if it gets more rock bottom than you're about to feel in these coming years. And then also I feel like guilt, right? When you look at like psychological and spiritual imprisonment, I think it's constant, it's weird feelings of paranoia, of guilt. And then sometimes like, what is it? That idea that you're the savior and shit like that. Either way, you are now bound to something nasty that, by the time you worked out what you shackled yourself to, I don't think you'd be feeling too great. Let's move on to even stuff like, oh my God, institutional confinement. So this will be something we're going to discuss later, but I think at this time, right, you are going to see people forcefully institutionalized. But the guys, so again, I did this video on TikTok not too long ago, but I talked about when concentration camps are being built. It wasn't, they weren't known as death camps originally. Originally, they were used to like imprison terrorists or people who were a threat to a state. And then over time, these became like different multiple sites. And before you knew it, it was people who were homosexual, it was people who were disabled, it was people of different colors and creeds, and like it's so insane how the normalization of these types of institution like spread like wildfire. And it's the normalization of dehumanization that led to those death camps, because these things were not hidden. That's one of the biggest Western propagandas. These sites were not hidden. They were in daylight. The only time you can claim they're hidden was originally when they were lying to people about these being labor camps. After a while, they knew what they were. and they cheered on people being sent to them. Likewise, maybe some people might retreat from certain norms and societies and kind of create their own haven. But TBC on that. Also, I think when you see the Pisces element, it's this idea that all that kind of indulging in illusions is now going to put you in a reality that is inescapable. Because again, that idea of imprisonment being symbolic, right? I was thinking about stuff like financial debt, right? Toxic relationships, victim mentality. That there's going to be a lot of complex nuances where people are suffering. You'll see a rhetoric of like, I don't understand how I got here in A, B, and C, but like, I would argue there might be a clearer path than you're looking at. And the last one that I had was like, this might be a lighter note to end on before we look at the Pisces nakshatras, karmic justice. Because again, whilst there's so many clear themes of how prison escalates, right? I don't know if I touched on this earlier in the video, but every time we've seen this transit, right? Essentially, prisons, this is when the Nazis started imprisoning different kinds of people. This is when the Spaniards started imprisoning Cubans and different indigenous people of South Americas. This is the same time the British Empire started imprisoning people in like South Africa. I think they called it the Boer War, right? Where they literally were imprisoning women, children, elderly, and slaughtering communities in the hundreds and thousands, if not millions. This would have been the same as the gulags, right? So when the USSR was literally like taking down all of fucking Eastern Europe, how the Americans would have created the concentration camps for the Japanese, and even the Japanese, when they created their concentration camps, you have the same transits that we have currently. But in the same breath, I think we might see historical crimes that were covered up or not acknowledged start to get the justice that they deserve. And in your personal lives, if there's been delayed justice, or like all of that, in these 2.5 years, it will come to completion. Just to end on a lighter, brighter note. Should we talk about Pisces nakshatras now, hibiscuses? You want to chit chat about Purva Bhadrapada, Pisces type 1? I brought notes. So again, the ruling deity of Purva Bhadrapada is Aja Ekpada, right? That is one of the most kind of fiery and mystical forms of Shiva. So sometimes it translates into English as like the 3-footed or 1-legged goat, depending on what you're going with, right? But when you see the images of it, it's usually like either this very fiery serpent with a goat's head or like some kind of like mystical creature. Different parts of India show and symbolize Aja Ekpada differently, right? But what the deity represents is transformation and kind of like the death of certain beliefs, but it being a fiery process, right? So again, think about how many people are going to switch on, how their ignorance, their complicity, them kind of ignoring like the reality of things, what it's led them to, right? That's going to spark a flame or two, even in the most in denial person, right? And really, the one wonderful thing that we do see in Purva Bhadrapada is this idea of the destruction of illusion into like bright truths and liberation from a lot of kind of bondages that are rotting the soul. Because you've got to remember, in Pisces nakshatras, the soul is being prepared for a new life. And what is a new life, hibiscuses? One that is free of colonialism, right? And in Bhadra 4, particularly Purva Bhadrapada, it's this idea of completion, right? You are now in the transitioning phases of your freedom, but it often deals with having to face the accumulation of what your previous beliefs, basically the life you have lived, what has it brought you, right? And again, for many people, I think for most people, it will be this understanding, I now have to do life differently because the way we were playing it is not working. And you will have very little reason, excuses. There'll be nothing for you to hide behind. But in some ways, that's really empowering. You know it's time, because if not now, when? You know, there will never be a perfect time to start, and you will not have more. Figure it out now. The changes you are wanting to see, there's just going to be a little fire under your ass that will get the job done, or at least get you jumping up, right? Let's talk about the power of Purva Bhadrapada. So The power to raise spiritual energy through sacrifice is the English translation, right? So essentially, even in Bhadra 4, it talks about breaking free from karmic cycles. Think about everything we've discussed thus far. A lot of the oppression we are seeing is because over different generations, we have not successfully broken away from the ideologies, the norms, the systems, the structures, the culture, the art, the languages, all of it hibiscuses that keeps us oppressed. But in order to break us out of those karmic cycles, so think about when we talk about generational suffering, we would not have generational suffering if we had come up with the solutions of our freedom. It's not that the stuff that we done before is completely ineffective, but now we need to evolve the approach. Just like many generations before us evolved their approach and got us a little bit closer. The issue is, there's just a couple of decades where we're being complacent. So now we got to make up for lost time. You know? It's probably worth pointing out, Purva Bhadrapada deals with intense purification. Just to summarize, the horrors that will be unfolding, once again, will give you very little room to stay with your bullshit. It's up to you if you want to move, but just know God is not giving you any woo-woo, any excuse, any lie. Like, God is making it very transparent, the reality and the fruits of things. If you want to keep like chomping on rotten fruits and acting like you are a buffet at a 5-star hotel, that's your business. The rest of us have acknowledged all the fucking fruits is laced with poison. We don't get the best crops. And you know what? We, in the best way possible, don't even want to eat at the hotels. In fact, we're going to get back land. We're going to apply our knowledge to grow our own food. You can sit here and suffer, but we won't. And again, in many ways, I think when you see Saturn in Purva Bhadrapada 4, you're looking at like I think you're seeing the final burning of karma that's been holding you back. So again, like the nature of karmas is as you do, you build and you burn, right? And I just think again, we're at this time where any little excuse you were clinging onto that was stopping you from being held accountable for who you are and what you do, it's being ripped away. So let's go with it. Go deeper, right? Let's talk about the ruling planet, which is Jupiter. Purva Bhadrapada is an incredibly humanitarian planet. Like, all of Purva Bhadrapada you see in the most brightest of activists, thought leaders, world leaders. Like, it's really powerful minds who know how to but it's the burning of beliefs, right? It's this idea that you can liberate people from the belief that you deserve to be oppressed. This is as good as it gets. This is not suffering. This is something else. The delusions are not functional, right? So I think, again, you're in this time initially of like a very deep revolution that I think begins philosophical, right? You're shown truly, and this doesn't have to mean you have bad beliefs, but it will let you know what beliefs are crippling you, what's making you scared of making those changes, what's making you feel like you're not smart, capable enough, right? And also, you know, Jupiter's influence is so much about conclusions, justice, and like the fulfillment of Dharma, righteousness. Yeah, it's a spooky time to be someone who's been horrible, because it's just, I think, karmic reckoning, moral awakening, and divine justice is what I'm getting from my notes here. Even then, let's talk about the life aim of Purva Bhadrapada. It's moksha, right? So that's liberation. How can you think, right? Think of it like this. So many of us crave the same thing: financial security, a life full of meaningful experiences, wonderful connections, joy, art, pleasure, faith. Like, I don't think we crave anything too much different from one another. Maybe we appreciate it in different forms, but I think we're striving for the same thing. How many times have we rejected ourselves from having these things? Or how many times have we been rejected from even being allowed to experience these things? Because we have been shackled to routines, norms, educations, understandings that make us just feel like we're not deserving. I think about this a lot. When I used to talk about Starbucks spirituality, I just use the one point I used to make is, why are you also addicted to being told there's something wrong with you? Why is your go-to self-help? Like you were not like, because again, like I'm very I don't show it a lot online, but like I'm really religious. I have a lot of faith in God. I think I'm designed by God to learn and evolve, and I will have some shortcomings that will teach me why I need to learn and evolve. But I don't think God made me imperfect. I don't think God made me I don't think I need fixing from man. I think my job is to find my way back to God. I think my job is to understand God in its different forms, so I don't fall prey to like false gurus or like false ideologies that are like perpetuated in hate and things that would rot my soul. But like, yeah, I'm not born with this belief there's a sickness or there's something wrong with me. I believe that God has molded me to be strong, smart, intelligent, but I got to use it in a way that does right by him, instead of like, I don't know, diminishing myself and like all the belief and faith that he has in me. And again, I think because I read so many people's charts, do you know one thing that's so crazy to me? And I don't know why when people say stuff back to me, I'm like, wow, really? I'm like, yeah, of course, probably, Barney. They come to you for predictions, but like, so many people know in their hearts of hearts what they would like to do, what they love, what they're passionate about, but at some point they just kind of get tarnished or mutilated to thinking like they couldn't be that, or they're inadequate enough, or it's silly and it's stupid. But I'm like, but God built you to have these feelings and talents and skills for a reason. Why would you let man distract you from that? So I think, again, the death of many beliefs actually might be very liberating. It generally is a time of a lot of catalyst changes. So again, the horrors will be horrific, but it's enough fire to get the party started, right? And likewise, because Purva Bhadrapada is symbolized by the legs of a funeral cot, it's a time where the soul kind of goes through a rebirth. Because I told you, astrologically, we've been going through the process of death and rebirth. It's over now, but this is a part of like the first phase where you understand this is like your new 20-year chapter. And it's a direct result of all the karmas you've been accumulating. And again, that only sounds nasty if you've been doing different stuff. But ironically, Saturn's actually really strong in Purva Bhadrapada, even the Pisces part, right? Because traditionally, Saturn hates going through Pisces. Probably because I imagine it's a bunch of people whining and bitching like, I don't deserve this. And Saturn's like, I have watched you for several seasons. I have seen every episode, every fucking blooper. I've seen the scripts myself. Oh, hell no, you know? But essentially, Saturn in Purva Bhadrapada is a very stern karmic judge. It feels heavy but purposeful, and I think again you understand this is a time where karmic scores are being settled. It will bring harsh but necessary lessons, often related to justice, suffering, and ultimate liberation. But essentially, I think when you're looking at Saturn's aims in Purva Bhadrapada, like I said, it's here to enforce karmic justice. So I think a lot of bullies, a lot of oppressors are going to face the punishment that they deserve. But meanwhile, victims will find their strength. Like baby, it works both ways. A lot of energy to dismantle corrupt structures. Maybe that's personal, societal, depending on where you're at. But I think we all feel the same energy. And in a deeper and more religious way, it's a time of spiritual maturity. I think this is when people break away from that, you know, like the woo-woo Starbucks spirituality and all the fakeness. Like, in many ways, this cruelty is returning you back to God and that source. And it's not, I always say this, right? God is meant to be in many different forms and religions. There is not one path. Right? The key thing is you learn to put one foot in front of the other and find the path that is right for you, and not be stuck in a space that is stopping you from going on that journey. And I just think all the shit that's going to go down is just going to push you further on your path, and you deserve it, hibiscuses. And then again, I think when you look at karmas and punishment, I think past life karma, so anyone who's had like abused their power, religious hypocrisy, or kind of like causing anyone deep spiritual, emotional harm, the ass getting kicked. Oh, this is a chapter, baby. And I think for some people, it would manifest like they would have sudden crises of health. Or it might be like financial crises, emotional crises, but you'll be forced to surrender either way. You might even, because Purva Bhadrapada is really fiery, I wonder if like you would feel burnt by your own ego or like the stuff that you've created. So like you'll be burnt until you let go. Ironically, we burn people in cremation, so voila. But likewise, I think many people we put in situations where they have to fight for justice. They have to use their strength. They'll be taught that they have the muscles and might, even if they've been like, I don't really like this. No, you're strong, you built. Think about Hercules. You know, like the beginning of Hercules, where like originally he's like a gangly kid, but he has a lot of strength, and then Phil trains him to be a hero. I would put that song in here, but I don't know if I would get copyright strike. But zero to hero. And also, I think for some people, they'll have to endure suffering to learn compassion, which is really sick and dark, but that is the nature of Vedic astrology. Then I had another note of how Saturn will help Purva Bhadrapada. No, how Saturn and Purva Bhadrapada will help the oppressed. It's been a long day, So number one, I think it's going to expose hidden abuse and bring perpetrators to justice. I think, like I said, it gives victims the courage to break free. I think through sudden realizations and like external events that make them understand what they've actually been through. Because, you know, like they talk about, what's it called? The one where like, there's a term for it. Stockholm syndrome, where you like fall in love with your kidnapper and you kind of forgot that like, no, baby, you're a victim, bada boom, bada bing. It will force a societal reform. So religious, legal, patriarchal, cultural, political, whatever. But that time is now. And again, I think there's a lot of spiritual liberation in terms of like your suffering will make you realize how strong you are. And other than that, is there anything else I have for you? Maybe let me just quickly take you through the deity again, because I feel like there's stories about his strength you can see that might make you feel warm. Maybe let's start with number one. So Ajay Buddha is kind of known as like a cosmic pillar, right? So this idea of him being like one-legged or three-legged, it talks about like being the one who's strong enough to hold the sky. So like your strength creates beauty. Your strength allows for like resources to feed and grow the rest of the world. But it's important to be strong. There is no... Everyone is made of strength, and sometimes our responsibilities will make us understand how strong we truly are, right? Also, he's linked to Agni. That's the idea of like eternal fire, like that passion in you, that purpose in you can never be extinguished. It can definitely be dampened, but the more you learn to protect that fire and learn how to use that fire. And I think again, there are some scriptures where like they reference that one-leggedness as this idea of divine truth, that you would be just... So like I was kind of thinking about it, right? You know, like there's like horrible stereotypes we have of people that maybe are... They're not like able-bodied. They may like have different limbs, or like just their body might be moving and grooving in a different way. It's so weird how we assume if someone doesn't have like a certain limb or is built a certain way, they wouldn't be able to do stuff, when it's like, no, but they could do other cool stuff, and they can probably do what we do. Yeah, and I think maybe that's it. In many ways, the things that you thought stopped you or you had shortcomings, you're going to learn like, no, you can do that and some. It was all a lie. Also, it's connected to Rudra, which is another form of Shiva. So essentially, it's destruction of ego, the power in austerity. Hear me out. In suffering, you will be fortified in such a way that you become strength. And again, with Rudra, it's like radical transformation, but liberation. It's a lot of, renouncing. In Rudra, you see the renouncing of a lot. And then finally, well, this is what I think I originally want to talk about, this understanding. So Ajay Buddha sometimes is known as the unborn. And it's this idea of like unbirthed potential. So just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean it can't be birthed, right? And it's also this idea of beyond time, beyond birth, beyond death. So again, like, isn't it interesting when we talk about like liberation and peace? These are things that are eternal. These I always say to people in readings, you gotta have something about you that's bigger than you. Because when it's bigger than you, when you don't have the energy, when you find all the excuses, when something is not for you, it'll make you fight differently, or make you get up in the moments you think you can't get up. And likewise, it's a form of Shiva. It's a destroyer of time. The time of oppression is being destroyed in front of our eyes. Other than that, let's take a little beveragino break, and then let's come back to talk about Uttara Bhadrapada. I'm going to have to power through this because once again, guess who has low batteries and we haven't even got to my predictions yet? It's the ADGL all. So, number one, firstly, when you look at Uttara Bhadrapada, you're looking at some form of enlightenment, which, thank God, you would think after all that destruction, you would learn a thing or two. So, as always, let's begin with the deity. So, the deity of Uttara Bhadrapada is Arya Bunyana. So, basically, it's like the serpent of the deep sea. Fun fact, this is also the same serpent that Vishnu rests on. So, it's basically one of the pillars of the universe. So, number one, when we look at Uttara Bhadrapada, it talks about dormant energy. So what's so funny is Uttara Bhadrapada contains this karma that shocking life events happen that snap the soul from being like passive into action, which when you see some of these predictions, if this shit don't make you snap into action, I got nothing for you. I got nothing for you. But also I don't make these videos for you. I am talking to the game changers. And at some point, my delusional ass does think this astrological knowledge will hit the people who will bring in the changes into society that we all deserve to see, and I will be backing you all the way, so don't worry about it. I do it for us, not them. Uttara Bhadrapada also symbolizes hidden wisdom, depth, and transformation. So this is a thing, right? Often people feel like they don't have the answers, they don't have the solutions, their knowledge is not enough. Oh my God, how all that shit is going to be Uno reversed on your all, right? Think about all the life experiences you have been through thus far. You don't think there's a slight chance God wasn't training you for something? Come on, baby. And likewise, hidden wisdom. The crimes will be whistle blown upon. You're not hiding. Every oppressor and bully, you're cooked. You're cooked. Like, astrologically, sounds about to turn into a bounty hunter. You're not making it out alive with this thing. Like, also, the deity represents patience, wisdom, and a gradual awakening, right? So even the story of Arya Buddha, he originally comes from a family that's really, really cool, very powerful, but very cool. And what you see is like this kind of conscious awakening in him, where he goes, I realize the way my family and my community is living their life is not right. I don't wish this for myself. I need something different. Does he have the answers? Absolutely no. A lot of his story is like searching, learning, unlearning. But he gets there, and when he gets there, he becomes one of the most like powerful serpent deities that we have in our religion. So you don't come ready-made. There's God puts the tools like within your soul and your mind and all of that. But the journey is learning how to use those tools, sharpen those tools, protect those tools, and build with those tools. Bada boom, bada bing. The other thing is, this sign is really related to this idea of like eternal wisdom and truth. So I think it talks about like the gradual releasing of knowledge and building from a place of strength. So I talk about this a lot, right? You are not punished on what you don't know. It's not how it works, right? And if it is, God is more of a gamesman than we probably recognize, and we should probably start watching game shows way more. But what we are judged upon, and what I think really influences our karmas, is once we know certain stuff, what decisions and choices do you make moving forward? So whilst you may not have known previously, you know now. What are you going to do differently? So again, let's go back to this conversation of concentration camps. How many times do you need to read or watch a piece of history to understand what is happening in front of you? The blueprint is always the blueprint. Ironically, the oppressors have never got smarter. They've got sloppier in many regards. They don't have any fresh ideas. They're not innovators. They're literal thieves. They're thieves and bullies. My mother did not birth me to be fucking outwitted by a bitch that hasn't had an original thought since the fucking 1600s. You understand? Why would the same apply to you? Stand up, you know? And likewise, I think it also talks about the courage we find to speak our truth. So as Saturn makes its way through these different types of Pisces, even the person with the most meekest, shakiest, maybe speech impediment like myself, oh, you're going to be a delightful speaker. You're going to be in this bitch like Cat Williams. So again, you get in there. Even let's talk about the Shakti, right? So I think when you look at the Shakti of Uttara Bhadrapada, if you translate it into English, I think it'd be something along the lines of this idea that with discipline, effort, you burn away like spiritual bondage. It's this idea of also kind of being like purified through austerity. Okay. So I think number one, it talks a lot about, it's what I said earlier, when you go through suffering, you work out actually how strong you are. And you will be so surprised when you find out you have muscles that you didn't even know you had. And it's in historical times. And again, go look at the Rahu and Ketu video I made. Even the most everyday person is gifted with this ability to become historical and radical. Everything we see, don't let it make you sad and powerless. Let it be the thing that radicalizes you. Let it be the thing that was the straw that broke the camel's back. You're not witnessing this for nothing. It has a purpose. It's meant to give you a sense of divine rage, inspiration, like enough is enough. And change comes. Change is here. Change is coming. And they do you know the thing is, the oppressors think this is going to be like their standard routine where they do it for, no, this is not your Afghanistan. This is not your fucking, chopping off of Palestine and Punjab. This is not your fucking butchering of the different African countries and kingdoms. This will not be the story. This is a story of where your greed overreached and we snapped your fucking arm off. Stand up, hibiscuses. And in some ways, think about a snake, a serpent, right? It sheds its skin. You're shedding your garments. You're shedding your ignorance. You're shedding your low self-esteem. All the things that stop you from blossoming is coming off you like a silk dress after the Christmas party. But it dissolves steadily. It takes time to shed skin, but you're shedding it nonetheless. Ironically, the ruling planet of Uttara Bhadrapada is Saturn. Saturn's actually okay in Uttara Bhadrapada, to be fair. But it's deeply karmic. This is where you see the most mystical side of Saturn, which people often forget. I think we always think of Saturn like a jailer and a bully. But no, Saturn is a wooga wooga and witchy, just like the rest of them. So I think when you look at Saturn and Uttara Bhadrapada, it's this idea of like, if you're really about it, you have to be about it now, right? So like, for instance, you can't be reposting activism and then you're still buying Amazon. We're definitely doing a video about that man. I did one on TikTok and you will fucking eat it up. But that man is going to cause irreversible damages to the environment and literally cause the regression of employee rights, which is linked to human rights, and profit off war in the most nastiest ways. And he's playing both sides. And he'll be the reason a lot of you get in prison because it's through his technology they're able to capture people. You still want to buy Amazon? Is it that deep? Think of it this like, even this, for you to have the products you do in factories, people are being treated like modern day fucking slaves. That's a labor camp, baby. Symbolically, that's a fucking concentration camp. You can't tell me any fucking different. Do not be fooled. I did not alter the lighting to add some ambiance to this video. Instead, and very embarrassingly, I got up and I think I must want to make a cup of tea or something. And then before I knew it, it'd been 3 hours. And I was like, I swear to God, I was meant to be doing something. What was I doing? And then I was like, oh, you were filming this YouTube video that takes you forever to film. And I was like, I should probably haul my ass back into my living room and sort this out. And here we are. And if anything, a relaxing tone is probably necessary for the rest of this video. But where did we get to? Let's talk about the life aim of Uttara Bhadrapada, right? So again, when you look at the life aim of Uttara Bhadrapada, I think for them, the first one I always think of is this idea of mastering patience and endurance. Because the thing is, if you refer to the symbol of like a deep sea serpent, the knowledge is already with you. It's more of a timing act, right? When is the right time to exude that knowledge? Almost like a serpent, when is the right time to strike? And the time is now, right? Number two, I would also say to resolve deep karmic debts. Just because in Uttara Bhadrapada, you see so much chatter of like generational wealth, both inheritance and creating. But I think alongside that, we have to look at behavioral patterns that we've inherited, attitudes, approaches in that. So again, this is a time of, it's not introspection. I really do feel like it's rejigging stuff. It's not evaluating. You've had the last like 3, 4, 5 years to do that. This is when like you stop up like literally like a serpent coming to see you start uprooting stuff. And then I think thirdly, and most poignantly, when I think of Uttara Bhadrapada, because I find it a lot in very like successful individuals, and do you know what's so interesting? In their sectors, I always find they're the kind of people who were seen as kind of very easily to be like chucked aside, nothing special. No one ever thinks they're going to be the game changers that they are. So off the top of my head, it's like think about what Lady Gaga has done with music. Think about Mariah Carey in her early career. Think about an Alexander McQueen. Oh my God, perhaps even like she's trash and we absolutely will not be supporting her. But even like a Kim Kardashian and what she has done with reality TV shows and what you perceive as fame, all of those characters, when they first came on the scene, I don't think anyone was particularly taken aback and thinking they had endurance. And voila, right? But on a more serious note, I think many people would be surprised how not only can they serve other people, but how they can inspire other people. And I think that's the issue. We often are looking to other people to be that guide, to be that leader, to be that educator. And for some reason, all the right people for the job never look at themselves first. But meanwhile, the lunatics are outside the asylum and we're just like, this cannot be our options. I think when we think about those Uttara Bhadrapada individuals I discuss, they don't naturally have high confidence. They build it over time. And again, I think it's been their skills and techniques for the passions that they have that showed them that like they are more than capable and they are the leaders in those industries that they want to be. Food for thought, hibiscuses, food for thought. So I think again, when we think of Saturn and Uttara Bhadrapada, we're looking at a karmic judge figure, right? Saturn and Uttara Bhadrapada is very empowered. It feels strong, it feels purposeful, almost relentless. Like Saturn and Uttara Bhadrapada, that's a work ethic. Because if you think about the nature of Uttara Bhadrapada, and if it doesn't get caught up in its superficial nature, this is someone who has endured a lot, probably not been very supported, seen a lot. And I think it's one of those silent vows that you make it to yourself that like, I didn't go through all of that for nothing. I have not detached and shed all of that to stop here and this to be the be all and end all, you know? And in some ways, I kind of think Uttara Bhadrapada goes from, you know how in Purva Bhadrapada is very like quick, fiery transformation. It's very much like coming at you type of energy. I think when I think of Uttara Bhadrapada, it's this like art/science of building slowly, but building something that endures. So one thing I always found really funny was, because the thing is, me building whatever this is with Vedic hasn't been very intentional till recently, but like it makes me chuckle because I often find that my peers are so hungry and there's a quickness to them, whereas I was just like bish bash bosh. And I think because I had no pressure for myself to be perceived a certain way or even be a guide for someone, I never deviated from always learning. And then I think what that's done is over time, whatever I've built has more depth to it. And because there's more depth to it, it resonates with different kinds of people. It speaks to so many different stories and it ages pretty well. But also TBC, at the time of filming this, I did a prediction where I'm like, oh, Diddy's going to jail. But now I'm correlating it to the other predictions I made. Because I said, one of the predictions I see, and you'll see it in the slide, where I was like, people are going to be annoyed at sentencing. And if this little news notification that I got is true, apparently he's been found guilty on 2 charges, but the other ones, they're still deliberating, which makes me feel like he could get a mistrial, which makes me queasy. But nonetheless, we move. So again, I think when you look at Saturn's aim, when it's transiting the Uttara Bhadrapada, number one is very much here to start enforcing long-term karmic justice, right? So again, think about different kinds of oppressors, bullies, tyrants. Yes, I imagine for a very long time they have very much been emboldened and empowered to think they are above law, above consequences, above retaliation, above boycotting and resistance. But this is the era where you will find out. Because also, on a deeper note, you have to think about when Saturn goes through those 108 star signs of such intensity, and usually it takes about 28 to 30 years, whatever. That's a whole cycle of life, right? It marks a significant ending in something, good or bad, right? Because the same thing, if you think, because I think a lot about how so many xenophobic policies have come to life in Saturn and Pisces, because in the Pisces nakshatra, you also see illusion. You literally see the very uncomfortable consequences when people get caught up in Maya and crap like that, right? But in the same breath, whilst you've had the rise of xenophobia, there's been fabulous creation. There's been revolutionary art. You've seen the birth of like leaders you only get in certain lifetimes. So again, creation, destruction are the same thing. And think about those three activities I said, because it helps bring in justice. And then number two, probably very unsexy, but it does teach the value of patience, right? It takes sustained effort to see the stuff that you guys want to bring into existence. It takes a lot of patience to perfect. It's not even perfecting a skill. I would say finding your groove with the skill. Even me, like over the years, obviously reading has become much more smoother, but then that's 16 years of direct readings. And then on top of that, I would even add in total, maybe 23, 24 years of learning around like Vedic astrology and stuff. So yeah, there's value in patience and even timing. So I always make this thing that when I used to work in technology, right, pretty senior, and it's so funny because I think people see your future before you do. So many of my peers used to call me like Rani the humanitarian in terms of like how I'd build startups and the things that I was looking at and like the thing, like just my approach to tech, right? And now I think I chuckle a lot because I'm like, what are the chances that God will amalgamate everything that I love with like religion, Vedic astrology, the deep interest and care that I have about social justice, human rights, and then just like the practical kind of, because in my head, these have always been very separate things, right? And then I think my very human like ambitions and probably lost ego in technology, in the finance industry, all of that. And then to think, like, because at the time when you're learning these things, I don't think you necessarily put it together like a delicious sandwich, but somehow life puts it together. And before you know it, you got a beautiful Italian sub. And it's funny how all these things now help me be able to, I think, engage people with like, this is why I think A, B, and C is going to happen. This is the purpose behind it. And I think these are the changes we're meant to bring in during this or to resist this. But patience takes that. And then finally, I was going to say, maybe like awaken to responsibility, because I think in some ways, when you're looking at Uttara Bhadrapada, you're meant to see your shadow self. Because again, Uttara Bhadrapada talks about someone being passive until something shocking happens and they snap into action. So again, if you think about the negative sides of Uttara Bhadrapada, right? It can be deeply superficial. It can become greedy and just thinks like inheritance, right? Like, this is just mine. I deserve this. Of course, like it can become quite sloppy quite quickly. It definitely is a little freak. It loves a good time. It enjoys pleasure. But likewise, if it's balanced, it's someone who's deeply compassionate. They're not disheartened by hard times, because I think there's a work ethic here. And also there's a real, I think, skill to cultivate joy and humor, even like when things feel abysmal. And in some ways it penetrates, right? That deep sea serpent is wisdom. It has lived. It's the same serpent that Vishnu rests upon. With our scriptures, it opens with serpent. So there's a secret power there, but I think it's about having a stillness, a level of purposeness, not being so easy misinfluenced by other people. Then you unlock the power. But I think my point is, right, when we acknowledge the ugly parts of ourselves and how it's created certain circumstances and consequences around us. Not only are we sobered up to the responsibilities and the consequences we have, I think it shows you the importance of community, of not perpetuating certain cycles, of just being very conscious, very self-aware, accountable. Now I want to talk to you about some of the karmas and punishments that I think will come as Saturn enters Uttara Bhadrapada, right? So I think number one, right? I think there's going to be ramifications for people who refuse to teach other people or hoard a certain kind of intelligence. Now I'm not talking about sensitive stuff around like cultural sacred symbols. I'm talking about like, so say for instance, right, we're seeing huge movements when it comes to like anti-intellectualism, but meanwhile the oppressors are very much still focused on sending their children to the best of schools, knowing A, B, and C. Even now, like, so many companies are benefiting from fascism, and I would pay attention to that. What do they know that their money is multiplying, and meanwhile you're worried you're not going to be able to pay the bills, you're worried about a war breaking out, you're worried about food scarcity? I think there's going to be very big whistleblowing or something where like the manipulation of knowledge or not sharing certain awareness of what people are up to, it comes out. The other part I want to touch on is the manipulation of sacred knowledge. So this will probably be an entirely different video, but those who followed me for years, I think in the first year that my community was really building, I spent a lot of time being like, yeah, like Starbucks spirituality is out, you know? And then it snowballed into me teaching people about how religion enables fascism. I think, again, there's going to be very clear cases of how people have misused religion, maybe the more tantric, mystical side of religious exercises, to groom people into being exploited, who've misused them to enable fascism. I think you understand where we're going with this. And then obviously like all the Avon astrologers, the fucking tarot girlies that can only ever speak about 3 subjects, like all those hens are coming home to roost, but in really big ways. Like it will not be pretty. Like, whilst I'm being jokey about it, like very disturbing things are going to happen to these people, and very disturbing things are going to happen to the people who can't break away from these people. That reminds me, I need to create a YouTube video about the false guru curse, because I think that yoga has become very relevant for a lot of people suffering in these next 2.5 years. And I also think people who've neglected their duties are going to go through a really tough time. You know, Pisces is a carer at its core. When Saturn comes here, it shows you what happens when you deviate away from proper empathy, when you think it's not your job to help look after things, or you take, like, you know, you abuse a position of power, authority, and all that stuff. Like, a lot's going to come with that. And again, I feel what it will feel like for people who go through those kind of karmas and punishments that I imagine will come with Saturn being Uttara Bhadrapada. I think a lot of people are about to feel very isolated and lonely, because the thing is, you neglect community, or you've aligned again with things that are very unsavory. I imagine you do a lot of that for some sense of connection with whatever you're seeking. But the truth is, it's isolated you, and you're going to feel the heaviness, right? And likewise, if you've been moving spooky and people are finding out, you have to remember, like, 2025 is the year of humiliation. There's so many really like disturbing things that are going to happen. I don't really think the crowd and audience and clients people are used to are going to be there anymore. Like, it's going. It probably is gone by the time you're watching this video, but like, it's not there anymore. But likewise, maybe it's kind of manufactured loneliness or isolation until you acknowledge like the real truth, or you align with like what we'll say is like sincere wisdom. Again, as always, I think there's going to be a lot of chronic health issues for people at this time that flare up. I think there's going to be a lot of betrayals by people they thought were like trustable. Like I think I tell you, I think people are in for some very hurtful experiences. Because just remember, the whole thing that I kept saying for like all of 2024 and most of 2025 before we got to May is how you move is going to put you into a 20-year chapter. And a lot of it, I don't think people are going to enjoy because they have not been moving in such a way that if you were met with the true consequences of who you are, what you've surrounded yourself, what you've allowed yourself to believe, I think a lot you're going to be throwing up, crying. I don't think you're going to be okay. Truly. Right? Because just, you can tell by the state of people, like even from an astrology perspective, like I'm in a weird position where I read for like thousands of strangers and stuff. So like you can figure it out quite quickly, like what's what. But on the other aspect, I think certain people are going to go through what I call delayed success. And what that is going to, like, I promise you, there's so much power in time. Time is not a weapon. It's not like your enemy. Like, because it's when you allow time to do its thing, it like the nature of things and people around you is truly revealed. When you allow time to do its thing, by the time God introduces you to the world, you are in such a way that very little could disturb you if it prematurely happened or you force your way, right? There's a certain gratitude, humility, I think a deeper understanding of why stuff is happening around you with delayed success, as opposed to like quick, fast manufacture. There's a certain magic in it, right? And again, Uttara Bhadrapada is a sign of great wealth. So delayed, yes, but well paid, up there. And then I also was thinking about how Saturn and Uttara Bhadrapada would help people who are oppressed, right? So number one, going back to this idea of truth, I think a lot of hidden truths are going to surface slowly but surely, and they won't be questioned, right? So again, I think the corruption being exposed, whilst this is not the first time in history, I really do think it will be undeniable. Like, these are not truths you can blow away. These are not truths that you can manipulate. These are not truths that you can like victim blame. It's very much like, nah, but this is what it is, you know? I think number two, a lot of victims are going to gain strength, right? Listen, justice may be denied in terms of timings, but it's just stuff being delayed. It's not actually denial. But the thing is, Saturn will spook you. You'll think like, fuck, my journey's over, and it's not. And again, I think also you've got to remember, so much is going on. So as this corruption is being revealed, the delays in justice are showing you how corrupt the system is. Justice will come, but the whole thing is corruption has to be exposed. And too often people, I don't know, people get mixed up and they'll blame other stuff and they won't actually look at the thing that is poisoning them. And in our case, when we're talking about oppression, it is very much like the normal legal frameworks, the structures, the approaches. It's very rarely the people, because people can only behave in such a way that a system allows. And I cannot tell you, because again, when I do readings, I'm not I read for everyone, right? Including really, like, I would say quite influential people who like really try to do good by people. There are so many people who want to help other people, but a system will make it so difficult to do right by these people. And it's not because they are trying, right? But again, like, it's that depth of like the downfall of colonialism, for it to be successful and for it to really make an impact where our ancestors fortunately did not reach. We're going deeper. And when you go deeper, you're looking at different stuff, not the superficial stuff that they distract us with. I also think, again, proper healing becomes possible. And again, I think it's because it's the intersectionality of it all. You can no longer hide behind like superficial community. You can't be doing up identity politics. You can't be a token using a cause to get a platform and money, but then not really be about it. This is where the real healing comes in. The real healing, I think, will enrage a lot of people because it's switching you on, not to how much you've been duped, because I imagine by the time you even watch this video, you know, but like, real change requires like proper digging up corruption. Real change requires in like confronting ourselves in the areas we fall short. It requires speaking up when someone's being like just unbearable. Like, it requires so much presence and engagement that like it will fortify you. And I think it heals part of you that is scared to speak up, is very pessimistic, thinks it's better to align with the oppressor than to really fight for liberation and abolishment. Like, it'll do science here, you know? And then finally, as always, because Uttara Bhadrapada has so much idea of like structure and hierarchies associated to it, what you're going to see with these oppressors is a gradual downfall. However, I want to emphasize the downfall of these oppressors are not the last of their kind. More are coming, and if anything, they're going to get spookier. But I think it is a nice introduction to you can dismantle. And also, the only reason they get spookier is because at all times, God is asking you to go deeper. So the poison comes out. It's not doing a half-assed job. Do you know, like, almost if you had, like, God bless, like some level of a pimple and you pop the whitehead, but you don't really remedy the wound of it. So then you find you just have this reoccurring pimple, and then you start working out, oh, it's my diet, it's my stress levels, it's hormone, it's access to like good skincare or clean water. Like, all of a sudden, it's not so much the pimple you're obsessed with. You're trying to change the environment and circumstances that allows that pimple to always come back, or worse, like turn into a boil. We're getting real surgical in this bitch. And again, I think when we look at the differences between Purva Bhadrapada and Uttara Bhadrapada and that energy shift, so I feel like you go from like a sudden fiery destruction to like a proper serious deep transformation about what you're up to and who you want to be in this world, and like how much you are willing to see those changes done and stick it out, right? You go from like sudden justice and kind of like karmic upheavals to like gradual solutions and real-time differences are being made and fortified, right? Because I think, again, resistance has been too viral, too flimsy, and too, for some reason, it's just too easy to break. So I think there's a certain level of seriousness and commitment that comes that allows, like, causes to really make good, you know? And then with Purva Bhadrapada, it's kind of like this experimental energy of trial by fire. And then when it goes into Uttara Bhadrapada, it's this idea of patience. So as you shed that karmic skin, I don't know, like, it's not just like randomly poking at yourself and hoping like stuff goes away. It's understanding like there is a process of medicine to follow here, and then my body will be healed, right? It's accepting that things take time. And when you have that, then you're more serious about seeing changes once again. Purva Bhadrapada, I think, is very good for like revolutionaries, provocateurs, people that are going to bring in that fire. And then I think when all the Bhadrapada comes, that's your educators, that's your strategists, that's your like deep mystics, and like the ones that give the philosophies, they give the knowledge that allows a revolution to endure. So I think Purva Bhadrapada is your revolutionaries. Uttara Bhadrapada is the wisdom that gives the revolutionaries the ability to do what they need to do. Oh my God, I hope that's mine and my astrology, truly. And finally, if I haven't bored you already, let's talk about Revati. Let's chit chat about Revati. So, ironically, Revati is ruled by Pushan, the guide of lost souls. And I had this very like immediate feeling. Based on everything that I've discussed, the first thing I keep thinking is this is cementing those people being permanent lost souls, right? Because there is going to be this shift that comes in where they are so attached to like these false leaders, these very unsavory ideologies, and it literally leads them into what only like seems like a black abyss. And I really think by the time they realize what they've associated themselves to, it'll be too late. Because either it's going to be what you were wishing on other people starts happening to you, or how you were perceiving a certain group you're perceived as, but by then you're lost. Like, this is why I always try and talk about karma so frequently. You have to understand, for us, karmas are unavoidable. You will always meet what you have done in different layers, in different ways, in different volumes, but you will meet it. What happens if you were so ungrounded in yourself? You were so easily poisoned by illusions, greed, attachment, like kind of all these things that in a dharmic phase we try to tell people to kind of stay clear of and watch in themselves. What happens when you become essentially those ugly attributes child, and like you just where do you go? What does that look like? So I just have this really dark image, right? And likewise, I really don't think yet it will hit home. I think when you have, let's say, what would come next? Like a Jupiter in Pisces or something of the chord, but that's a few generations, like 10 something years out. When it starts hitting these people's children's or whatever their descendant of their communities are, it'll be shameless that you're seeing their suffering, and it's all based on the choices you made around like hate, greed, arrogance, and it's gonna be uneasy, right? But on the other way, Pushan represents leading people to a new life. So whilst I have obviously a very somber outlook on what I think is going to happen to people who've really been misguided and misinfluenced and just they're too wrapped up in their own hate, I have the most wonderful, softest, serious belief that there's a long journey ahead. But literally, like how Moses was leading people, I think God is leading you guys to a much happier place, but it's not an easy journey. Because again, the ability to resist, the ability to dismantle, the ability to abolish, re-educate, empower, heal, entertain, like all these juicy things will bring a level of prosperity that none of our communities have seen. And it's not for nothing, right? It's taking you somewhere. Likewise, Prashant represents nourishment, abundance, protection. All these things in the different way God needs to, they will reveal themselves to you. So you're on the right path. The people who I see like as actual lost souls are like, it makes me so uneasy because I'm like, there will be nothing for them. There is no sense of community. There is no sense of redemption. There is just a very bleak future for a lot of those people. But creation and destruction are one of the same thing. So whilst they have to essentially digest an uglier mindset, opposite them, you probably have people who have felt very like marginalized, others frowned upon, all of a sudden like in real community, in real solidarity, in like just creation and destruction. And on that note, I think when you look at Pushan, it's about guiding souls to their ultimate destiny. Again, ironically, Revati has a lot of different themes of wealth and richness too. But what's so interesting is Revati represents unique wealth. It's not wealth that anyone can generate. It's wealth that's kind of divinely sent by God. And I think there's something in that. Because think of it this way. When we were talking about prison earlier in this video and I was giving you different examples, there are incredibly affluent, wealthy, very privileged people who've made their money in horrible ways, but they've done it for decades. They haven't really been opposed. They haven't really met justice. They've never really been outcasted or looked upon. Don't you find it very telling? Within the first few weeks of this transit, you have big organizations, institutions, families, and it's not just shaking the inside like a couple of money here and a couple of money there. You can no longer make that money the way that you're used to. And on top of that, you're facing real accountability. And then on top of that, you don't have that status and privilege or whatever that PR was that was murking your nasty character. That only Saturn and Pisces brings. And what it's done in a few weeks, what do you reckon that looks like when it marinates over time? And likewise, people who were too scared to speak up, people who never felt like justice was come in, people like, it's such a paradox at play. But like, again, even there's people that during this transit that have worked for years and years, thankfully, or like never really seeing light at the end of the tunnel, all of a sudden, paupers to princes. Like everything is so divinely timed that I'm like, don't sweat it. Just turn up, do the work. God will handle the rest because he always provides. So don't worry. Like literally don't worry. But yeah, Prashant also represents marriage, unity, and divine union. So again, I think you're coming into community and relationships and partnerships that are ever so lovely. And likewise, the people who joined up with other people for rotten causes, rotten times ahead, rotten times ahead. But in other ways, it's just about, I think it's a very clear difference between being guided towards enlightenment or kind of guided to terrible circumstances, but it's because you're following illusions. Bada bing, bada boom. On that point, let's talk about Shakti. So again, when you look at Revati Shakti, some of the translations will talk about the power to nourish and multiply, right? So it's this idea, it's the ability to foster growth, fulfillment, and just like abundance, because you've now reached the end of life. You have all those experiences, all those flavors, all that knowledge, all that talent and skills. So how do we bring it all together and have like the creme de la creme? But that's the point. You have everything you need. How are we bringing it together, hibiscuses? Remember what I said at the beginning of the video? Yes, in many different ways, people are going to feel versions of imprisonment, but there will equally be a lot of people that start to feel the taste of liberation, leaving that prison. When you look at Saturn and Revati, the cycle is complete. It's done. That thing before no longer exists. It's very much, you can't do anything with it. You can't resurrect it. You can't use it. You can't exploit it. You can't engage with it. It's done. There's only newness ahead. And who do you think that sounds scary to? Do you think that sounds scary to someone who wants to see changes in society? Do you think that sounds scary to someone who wants to create things that bring in healing, innovation, inclusion, happiness, joy? Do you think that sounds scary to people who want to see other people who look like them, sound like them? Like, that's not scary to people who are seeking change, because so much stuff has failed them, suppressed them, and hurt them. It only sounds scary to somebody who's basically benefited from a lot of harm. So pay attention to how people feel around you. It'll be very telling of their character. And likewise, I think there's this idea that you will be gently nourished and nurtured, again, very late night, until you reach your final destination. And you'll get there, and you'll have all the support and backing. Now let's talk a little bit about the ruling planet. So number 1 is ruled by Mercury, adaptability. I told you this journey is long and a lot's going to happen on the way, but you are being influenced to be flexible, to not just like meet your circumstances, but to see beyond them. And like, you see your circumstances, yes, but beyond them, you see the goal. And you keep literally moving and flexing like Mrs. Incredible until you get to the finish line. You know, Revati is known for its communication. It's known for its intuition. It's just known for this. Do you know what it is? In Revati, there's this like very secretive pulse where if you learn to trust your like intuition and your ideas and you learn how to follow them, it leads you to like the most abundance or the most unique experiences that are not accessible to everybody else. And I think, and again, in the era of fascism and oppression, there's probably some people we don't want to have access to certain things. So, but in that, if you think about the journey that we've discussed through the Pisces nakshatras, it requires a fiery transformation. It requires you to become responsible. And then when you have the mixture of those two, it requires you to trust yourself because you endured so much. So what's it going to be? Are you going to learn to trust yourself in your pulse, your ideas, and your talents and skills and abilities and your truth? Or are you going to keep going along with the same things that are literally seeking to imprison you? Don't get it twisted. There are very much people going to be holding keys, telling you it's the keys to your freedom, and they're walking you to a certain other place. The power of discernment has never been more necessary, right? Also, Revati, learning, teaching, divine synchronicity, because of Mercury. Go with the flow, expand. You don't need any more everything you need, you have. Now you are learning how to use those tools. You're learning how to build and build stuff that endures. You're learning you're not only just learning, you're learning how to share knowledge, how to teach others, so you all can grow and build together. I think in some ways, when Saturn meets Revati, and ironically, Saturn and Revati talks about paying the last karmic debts to society, but I think in many ways, Saturn softens here, right? I think the karmic lessons ease a bit because the wisdom of those mess ups, of those missteps, is being applied. So Saturn starts to back off just a little bit because it understands now you're evolving. For other people, Mercury represents deception. Saturn is obviously bad friends and human misery. It's gonna be too late is all I'm gonna say. Yeah, moving on. If you look at the life aim for Revati, it's really about completing the soul's purpose and journey, truly, when I think about it. So like, number one, it deals a lot with like this ability to cultivate abundance and share it, but selflessly, right? It deals with this concept of protecting the most vulnerable, serving as a guide, having the most fun with identity expression, and just learning how to become one with others. Yeah, oneness. Come on, God. Creation and destruction are one same thing. Yeah, you learn to bring it together. But yeah, I think Saturn in Revati is very much the final karmic teacher. I think Saturn feels way less harsh in Revati, but it's definitely more instructive, and it's looking to see if you are following those instructions. It doesn't punish as severely. I think at that time the soul's going to be prepped on how to release or execute ideas. I told you the time of chit-chatting is nearly over. I think it brings a certain maturity to the person. So in many ways, I think by the time Saturn is leaving Pisces and getting ready to go into Aries, we will be tying up karmic loose ends. It will teach you how to be responsible through nurturing different things, people, causes. And I think, again, it's gently removing distractions, right? So you can get on with the job, all the things that are blocking enlightenment. Now let's touch on karma's punishments associated to this. So again, I think a lot of people may suffer if they've been selfish in their abundance, right? Whether that's holding wealth, knowledge, resources, all of that, it's going to be ugly for those people. I think there's going to be major ramification for people who've been causing harm to the defenseless, children, animal, the poor, like predators of all different kinds are in for a very tough time. And I think in some ways, there's this idea that you'll be punished for abandoning people who relied on you, needed you, or helped you. Yes, it's going to be quite intense there. Now, I feel like how that may feel to people in those moments. I think number one, very much like feeling lost and directionless. I think a lot of financial stability is about to deeply take over many people's lives for years at a time. It's not going to be one that you bounce back from. I think there's going to be notable marriage troubles and family struggles. I think people are going to take on very serious chronic anxiety, especially about their futures. Yeah. Now, I think if we close out, let's think about how Saturn in Revati could help people who are oppressed. So I think number one, divine timing is going to protect a lot of people who feel vulnerable, right? I think you're about to see miracles. I think you're about to see unexpected help, great nudges, like just in the 11th hour, you will see God. I think a lot of abusers are going to face exposure or legal consequences. But again, pay attention to my TikTok videos that I'll be making about like how we victim blame. I think that's going to be really relevant. I think a lot of people are going to find healing through, I just think, finally surrendering from this idea that aligning with the things that literally are built to consume you and exploit you is not going to bring you joy. So I think surrendering away from them, breaking away from them, yeah, will help a lot of people. And if I'm honest, deep down, the one thing that will really begin is I think a lot of the people who are oppressed are going to be guided to safer environments. Like, it's all being initiated, like it's starting. So don't worry, you know. communities, places, homes, norms, it's all coming. Yeah. So I'll probably board your brains out with that. Let's get down to the juicy predictions, shall we, hibiscuses? So, prediction number 1 was all about prisons. Let's get to it. So the first one was the mass release of prisoners. Number 2, prisons turn into brutal camps. So at the time of recording this, I've just released TikToks about concentration camps. They are here. More are coming. And I think our job in these very scary times is the following. So number 1, to make sure we do not allow the ancestral mistakes of the past to happen again. Do not buy into any of this propaganda that they are immigration centers, they are places of work, they're places of like temporary housing. No, hibiscus, I'm telling you, these are straight up concentration camps. You are going to learn of horrific things from these camps, and they will expand unless you do the following. So number 1, you absolutely have to start dethroning any like local political leaders that you have that support these camps, normalize these camps, or gave their votes to these camps, right? Let them know their job is gone and you are not permanent. Number 2, you have to make it so difficult for these concentration camps to function. Boycott giving them any food. The people who own the contracts, the people who work there, make their lives miserable. And number 3, and most importantly, resist. Who are they putting in those camps? Your neighbors, your friends, your fellow citizens, the people, humans. Do not make it easy for anyone to feel like they can pick up these people and it's cool. Collective protection will create liberation. Study any time period where colonialism has been overthrown. It's only when the victims of that oppression started throwing hands and bodying down together, it made it so, like, it wasn't even worth the colonizers sticking around. It's when you are desensitized, it's when you start normalizing this behavior, it's when you think these type of places are even necessary, something's gone deeply wrong. And you probably are on the spookier side of my predictions. Thirdly, I said people falsely imprisoned are released. Likewise, huge tension over old cases and why certain people were criminalized in the first place. Long story short, Todd Chrisley has come out since I've made this video, so there's that. Moving on, prison riots, prison escapes. Again, if you just go back to prison riots, in the era of fascism and a lack of human rights, I actually mess with it. Also, can I ask you something? As we go through this exercise, I want you to think about why you dehumanize prisoners. Because when I was putting this together, I was like, isn't it mad how people don't see prisoners as humans anymore? You don't see them as victims of failed societies. You don't see them as victims of like very discriminatory profiling. You don't see them victims of poverty. You don't see them victims of like poor access, like mental health care. You don't, for some reason, you don't see what may have led them to be in the situations they're in. Sometimes you don't even see them as the true victims that they are, right? Again, I think when you look at Saturn and Pisces, whilst we're looking at different kinds of imprisonment, it's also forcing us to look at our more nastier, unsavory, selfish, obnoxious, pompous sides. Are you that much different to a prisoner in an institution? Are you not in prison in many ways? Are you both not suffering at the hands of other people? They don't stop wanting a life. They don't stop wanting good for themselves. Like, yeah, just look a little bit deeper. And if you feel like people should be in prison, I'll promise you there's something wrong with your heart, not theirs. So, prison escapes, well, I'll reserve comments for now. Political prisons are created, hibiscuses. Changes in how we sentence people. Political prisoners and prisons of war crime come under spotlight for deserving treatment. War crimes, the hypocrisy in war and justice changes allies and enemies across the world. Double. rise of totalitarian regimes and they get violent, persecution of minorities, global injustice, prisoners become tools for enforcing ideology, suppressing opposition, and perpetuating atrocities. If not a concentration camp, why shaped like a concentration camp? If not a fascist, why do you speak like a fascist? Let's move to the second slide, shall we? We'll take a light little break. So the second slide, and I think I intentionally would have done this because even this presentation is pretty heavy. I said you're going to see the launch of iconic talk show-esque figures. Pisces is a chatty patty. She loves a chit chat, you see. And again, Saturn dissolves illusions. Art fuels revolutions. When you think about revolutions and movements, the first thing you consume is the art. Art is also a secret weapon. It can give people hope when all they see is punishment. It documents history in a way that can't be misrepresented or misused. It's the voice of the victims. It's the expressions, the visuals, the sight. Great art, take up space. It's time. I also, next one, I said the release of amazing horror, fantasy, fairy tale, sci-fi, TV shows, films, and books. Again, I think it's really interesting because with these genres, one, obviously, it's offering escapism from a very cruel world, so I understand why they're very much back in favor. Someone's saying there's a direct link between recessions and like vampire teen stuff, and I was like, well, yeah, to be fair, when I was a teen and we were in the recession, Twilight was everything to me, but I don't think I was financially conscious. And in other ways, I think those genres allow you to explore oppression, darker themes of humanity, the normalization of very spooky stuff in a way that it's harder to censor than it is outright activists speaking up on a news channel, than a social media content creator showing you the atrocities. Isn't God funny? And sometimes it's easier for you to visualize your liberation when someone can take you to another world and make you feel like, well, I would want to live there. Next one, so again, like you can see the release of incredible artwork, books centered around social injustices. Next one, it's actually ironically a great time for pop music or just iconic music acts, right? So again, think of the Spice Girls, Coldplay, Nas, Fugees, Missy Elliott, David Bowie, Jimi Hendrix, Frank Zappa. They all come around in Saturn and Pisces transits. And lastly, and I think we could all do with a good laugh, mine is like obviously continually laughing at the fascists because ha ha ha. Honestly though, like they make me chuckle because I'm like, you guys look so lame. I really think we should bring back bullying and Def Jam comedy sets. Like I am so willing to teach you the art of cussing people out comedically because I think it's one of the best tools. Because tell me how you're that hateful but likewise so sensitive, because the second we start talking about your sexuality, your lack of fucking style and all that shit, all of a sudden it's all right, school shooter. But yeah, we see the launch of iconic comedians. Think of the likes like Cat Williams and Dave Chappelle's, maybe even John. Oh, I think someone told me he's a Zionist though. I'll refrain. Next. Let's talk about technological and scientific advancements. I really need to do a video separately on Musk, Zuckerberg and Bezos because they're going to create a lot of creepy stuff and we have to be absolutely prepared to handle them. And fun fact, all their Vedic charts overlap with America's Vedic charts and in the worst ways possible. But yeah, let's read this out. So you've got the launch of new medical treatments. You've got new way. Can I say something? As soon as I read that, I have such a fear because at the time recording this is when I've made peace that concentration camps are actually coming. And I have so many fears for people because healthcare is so deeply rooted in so many spooky, discriminatory beliefs. And a lot of the way we have majority of research comes from those camps, comes from unimaginable harm and derogatory beliefs of other people. So I feel queasy. New ways of treating chronic diseases. we'll probably have, so I also put here, like, I haven't. So I think obviously you're going to see the rollout of AI in healthcare, but I also think you're going to get a lot of misdiagnoses. On that note, we can expect lab-grown organs, progression in gene therapy, engineering, or some sort of biotechnological advancements. I don't know how great I feel about that in the era of fascism. Yeah, you can also see the launching of global health initiatives due to health crises. I'm glad I clarified that because I was about to say, questionable space exploration. In fact, conflict over space voyages between countries. Go and follow my TikTok, is all I can say. Groundbreaking discoveries about space. Yeah, fun fact, maybe you shouldn't militarize it or try to colonize it because aliens will kick your ass. I would actually love if the plot twist of all plot twist is aliens ascend and they're like, who are these creepy little people? And they just take out all the billionaire bros. I love it. Next, the release of new space equipment that gives new observations and travels. Q. Hardware resistance or changes in acceptance around these advancements. Very on brand. AI changes media, not in a good way, folks. I think you have loads of issues because I see a lot on my feed where there's like AI news journals. And at first it was actually really hard to tell the difference. Now I have a trained eye for it, but it's like, I understand how people fall for that. But yeah, I think AI is going to get kicked in the ball sacks very shortly, which good. On that, you're going to see a ban on new technology or certain advancements. But the other thing I want to push back on, I don't know if it's a ban or if it's a lack of access, but if it's a lack of access, then it makes it spooky because why are certain groups entitled to use that technology and other people aren't? And what do you plan to do with it? You'll see a breakthrough in environmental sciences. I want to emphasize a lot of them will probably happen in the global south because, you know, apparently most of the fucking European American world thinks they deserve chocolates, tea, iPhones all the time, and they haven't once clocked that the things that they are wearing, consuming, and take for granted are literally formed by harming other people. There's people who are forced into labor, forced into war zones, lose their families, dignity, access to education, access to water, so you can take a selfie, so you can have tea on tap, so you can do A, B, and C. And then we wonder why we suffer. Think about how you know stuff and yet you're so indifferent to the suffering behind it. Do you think there's a chance at any time that could revisit you? And finally, changes in animal care and reproduction. We might have to create a separate video for that. Next slide. The fascists come out, the activists rise, and political breakdown. So it's something really unnerving when you read your predictions back that you wrote. So I'm not really comfortable in sharing these predictions, but very grave human rights violations will occur. Yeah, they will. My hope is during this time we can see powerful new political parties established. People get serious about protesting and activism, and bans are placed on human rights violators. I hope once everything is over, you hold every person to account for their role in enabling the harm. Pay attention to what I said about humanizing and glamorizing these monsters. Next slide. Man-made tragedies. As you can tell by looking at these screens, these are not great, are they? Next slide. Economic and industrial changes. Bans and boycotts put into place over natural resources. But again, I wonder who benefits from them and who dictates them. Countries collaborate over natural resource projects, modern day colonial, environmental flavor. Energy and transport can be nationalized at this time, but that means it always could have been. Changes in financial regulations. Certain currencies can plummet and be devalued, never recovering. Also, new currencies may be launched after this. Think about the frankens, the euros. And number 7, war begins. Yeah, it does. Number 8, cultural and societal shifts. During this period, powerful new ideologies will emerge that completely alter the trajectory of nations. Think of the level of impact when Hitler and the Nazis' propaganda took hold, when Mao launched the Cultural Revolution, or even when the Church of England formally embraced the theory of evolution. These shifts don't just shape politics or policies, they redefine entire cultures and societal landscapes. And the last one, celebrities are fucked. They seem like the least important and most frivolous people at this time. I will let those predictions sink in. Let me just gather my thoughts and think about how we can end this video, because obviously it's not a comfortable conversation. And most of these things, I think, are inevitable. I even think by the time you're watching this video, you will see many of these things beginning to sprout. But we have to think about action. We have to think about moving forward. We have to make sure we are not being delayed, mystified, docile, all those things. So this is where I think I'm at, hibiscuses. When you see Saturn transiting through all these different types of Pisces, it's like this long arc of karma forming, right? And we're only again in like maybe the first 8th of this arc. Because really what it is facing the truth of who you really are and what you believe and what you've been up to, and it being reconciled. And I also think in many ways it's allowing you to understand that if you continue down a certain path, this is all that there is. But likewise, if you can find the courage to deviate, you can find the courage to think differently, to feel deeply, and to care sincerely, there is just such a different type of wealth, healing, community, and safety available to you. But you have to fundamentally be different, not want to be different. You have to exist differently, right? Because think about, unfortunately, all those predictions that I laid out. None of them are unique. Many are very frequently historically documented. So then we have to sit with ourselves and say, well, why are we so comfortable with history repeating itself? Why do we put ourselves into a position where we even recognize these patterns? So therefore, we're not really evolving as souls if we have so much pattern recognition. Something hasn't changed, or fundamentally, the work has not been done. So we shouldn't pride ourselves on being able to spot something from a mile away, because all that's happened, and I was thinking about this when I was like looking at different eras where you've had like colonialist, fascist, imperialist, kind of like their projects haven't really worked out, but they've gone back into the world. So for instance, everyone knows in the open, loads of those German scientists that were doing obscene research in the concentration camps, NASA took them. American medical research took them. Most of Europe took them. And they were allowed to keep doing experiments. But all of a sudden it wasn't so bad because you're working for the Allies. Okay. I think I have a hard time with this video in particular, because I just wonder at what point people's comfort zones and like this need to have the products and services that are only birthed under an oppressive system are so much more worthy than people's lives, than people's dignity, than people's respects. Like more important than communities like being not erased. That's the thing I struggle with. But then I think it's that age-old thing. If history repeats itself, then heroes are always birthed. There's always a resistance. There's always something opposing it. It never goes unchecked. I think the work here, and maybe the most potent lesson of all, is we need to get to a position where, because we know how to dismantle, we know how to dethrone, we know it, we've done it many lifetimes and we'll do it again. But where we fall short is we take out one kind of power and often put in its cousin-like power. And what I think one thing that's been really poignant for me and I keep thinking about is how we ended up in a cycle where the oppressed people have become the oppressors. Like, I think about this all the time. I've been having really trippy experiences. Like, I care so much about Punjabi liberation, right? And Punjabi independence and like reclaiming of land. Like, I like so much. But I was thinking, isn't it wild that in 2025, I exist in a time where I could have fellow Punjabis who maybe look more Punjabi than me, right? They sound more Punjabi than me. They do everything that's like more culturally accepted than me. But these are the same fuckers that will fraternize the people who genocided us. These are the same people that wear certain cultural things to benefit from the culture, but never really like contribute to its liberation. That's the work, isn't it? It's doing the ugly work, the uncomfortable work, the stuff. Thing is, I think when I look at Saturn and Pisces, the reason I know so much of that heinous stuff is going to happen because no one ever wants to consider themselves to be the monster in people's story. No one ever wants to really look at themselves and be like, but I have drank from that poison cup. And often people are so much more fixated with finding the excuses and these lies to justify why they've done horrible stuff than to just own it. But then in some ways, going back to it, we wouldn't have our heroes, our game changers, our defiant, our rebels, all of that, if there wasn't someone who was exuding the things that disheartened them. Because the same people that I find disheartening, disingenuous, deeply cruel, are the same people who inspired the work of the activists. They are the same people that, when said people are in opposition to, show you why something is not worth doing that way. You can't have one without the other. I think that's the great paradox of life, isn't it? That we seldom can exist in a state where just goodness can be in its totality. But then maybe there wouldn't be much point of us reincarnating if everything was good, because how would you develop your muscles? How would you develop your ideas? How would you evolve? It would just be really gluttonous and shit. But I don't ever feel like it has to be this shit. And maybe all I can hope is in astrologically the downfall of colonialism, the reason it's so dirty, it's so visible, it's so like potent and gross, is because it's going down. So it has to have one last hurrah. And whilst they have been following the same blueprint for God knows how many centuries, we don't have a blueprint, but we have a very clear documented process of what has worked and what has not, and what has not worked. We don't repeat that mistake. We evolve, we get sharper, we find other ways of making it happen. And we will, because it's like the age-old thing. They always fail. This is when you study any level of oppression, do you know how much it takes to allow oppression to thrive? It's the propaganda in the movies. It's the normalization of it's so much work. And the funniest thing is, all that manipulation, all that disinformation, all these really like gross, potent poison, they're not even harming people as effectively as they used to. So then they have to get done. That's why I think like a lot of it, they don't play innocent so more, or they're not so bothered about not having convincing marketing or PR, because they know people know. The issue is we've become either too tired or fatigued. And the one thing about Pisces, it's nourishment. You will be energized in whatever way to fight back. You will be energized in such a way to build the things you are seeking. You are not a lost soul. The issue is, over time, you've collected all these tools, but you haven't learned how to use them. In really severe cases, you might not even be able to identify your tools, but let's just put that to the back of our heads for a moment. We'll come back to it. In this chapter, you will build. And the one thing that's really beautiful is you're not just going to build for yourself, you're going to build with other people. And the cool thing is, you and another person could have the same tool, but build something completely differently. And also, you both know how to use that tool differently, so you can learn from one another. Some people are going to be building the prisons, other people are going to be building their palaces and the new societies. And somewhere in that journey, there's going to be a big clash. But there will be a very clear side that wins. Just make sure you're on the right side of it. And I think with that, this video has took hours to film. I'm all talked out. I hope that was helpful. And I imagine after this, I'll put like a pretty little side to capture all the things that I didn't say, because it's obviously a very sensitive video. Other than that, love you, hibiscus. Show me what you can build. Bye.